In this screencast, I'm going to explain to you how to create your first iPhone application. You should have Xcode installed. We're running 4.5 at the moment. So to start, we'll go to File, New, Project. Or alternatively, on the splash screen, you can click on Create a new Xcode project. We're going to use a single view application. And we're going to call the application Hello World. And the identifier can be anything you want, but it should be a reverse URL. And the class prefix we're going to call hello. We need to use storyboards, and we should use automatic reference counting, but we do not need unit tests. Nor do we need to create a local repository. I'm going to save mine to the desktop, but you should save yours to somewhere that gets backed up. And here we are. Now the first thing you need to do is to make sure that you have all the files that you need. And the first screen you see is a summary screen, and you can see it's going to be designed for the iPhone only. The main storyboard is called Main Storyboard, as you can see on the left hand side, and we're going to support portrait only, so we need to unclick those two buttons. If we had an icon, we'd place them in here, we'd drag them in, PNG images, and the splash screens or launch images appear down here. So let's go to our storyboard to start with. Now, as you can see in the storyboard, let's get rid of this sidebar, there's a representation of our iPhone screen. And I'm going to change from an iPhone 5 screen to a 4, just so I've got a bit more space to work with. So, the first thing I'm going to do is drag some controls onto the form. So, I'm going to choose to have a label to start with. So I pick a label up and I drag it onto the interface. And I'll just make it a bit bigger. I can change the properties of this label using the Attributes Inspector, and I'm going to center align and just make the font a little bit bigger so we can see it better. And I'm going to change the text to hello. Next thing I'm going to do is drag a text field. I'm going to place this directly underneath the label. And again, I'm going to make things a little bit bigger so we can get more text in there. I'm going to leave the text blank, but the placeholder, I'm going to put a little bit of text in there to explain to someone what to do. And the last control I'm going to add is going to be a round rect button, which I place underneath the text field. Again, I'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see. And change the text on it. And that's the interface done. The next thing we're going to do is open our controller file. Now remember, we have a header file and an implementation file. And the first thing I've got to do though is I've got to hook up the two objects. I've got to hook up the view to the controller. So I'm just going to clean the screen a little bit, and I'm going to launch what is called the Assistant Editor. And I can now see on the left hand side I have my view, my storyboard. On the right hand side I have my header file, as you can see from the top. And I'm going to select my label, I hold the control key down and I drag from the storyboard label into my header file. And because I want to be able to change this label, I have to create an outlet for it. I'll call this one my label, type UI label, storage weak because we only want the label to exist while the form exists, and I click on connect. And that's now created an outlet called my label. I click on the text field, hold the control key down again, and I drag across and repeat the same process, but this time it's a UI text field. I'll just call that one my text field and connect. And these little dots show what each of these outlets is connected to, because I can hover over them and see. The final control is the button. I control drag again, but the button's going to have an event handler associated with it. So I'll call this one, instead of an outlet, it's going to be an action. So actions generate event handlers. And this is going to be called my button. Type I'm going to specify is going to be a UI button. Event is the event handler we're going to create, and there's lots of options. Touch down, touch drag, touch up inside, value change, and we're going to go for touch up inside, which basically means you've touched it and then you've lifted your finger up, so it's a click. And I click on connect, and as you can see, it's created an IB action. Don't worry too much about the syntax at the moment, we'll explain that in more detail next week, next session. So now we've finished, so we can go back to our standard editor, and rather than opening the left hand side, I can choose from the breadcrumbs which file I want to open. And I want to open hello view controller.m. And this is my implementation file. And if you look at the bottom, you can see there's my IB action generated for me. Now, what Xcode does, it will automatically generate getters and setters for my different outlets. So I haven't got to do any of that anymore. So it's much easier. This is what's called a class extension, which allows me to declare private variables, private properties. And what we're going to do is add some code to this action at the end. So let's make a start. Now, before we do anything else, let's test to make sure that this is working. So I choose iPhone 6 simulator from the top, and I click on run. And there it is. And at the moment, I can type into the box. But when I click on this, nothing happens because we haven't added any code to the action. So let's start by putting a little log message in here. So, as you can see, a log message has a particular syntax. Now, the quotes mean we want to display a string, which is what you do in any other language, but the @ symbol is very important. What it explains, it's an NS string, it's a string object. If I miss the @ sign off, it would think it was a C string, in other words, an array of characters. So now if I stop and run again, and I click on the button, in the log, you can see it's displayed our message. So we know that's working. So now I'm going to create a string variable to store what's been typed into the text box. Now I'm going to retrieve the value from the text box. So Self is the current object. This allows me to access my properties in a safe manner. And I'm going to retrieve the string text property. Now the asterisk I put at the start means this is a pointer. Okay, because all objects are on the heap and are referenced as pointers. And I'm going to display that in the log. And I'm going to display an object. And the object is going to be the message. Notice I haven't got to save the files when I run it. It automatically does this for me. And now you can see in the log, hello iPhone. And the final step is to assign that value to the label. And that should assign the value to the label. And there's our first iPhone application.